I invite members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons. Stephen Flynn to speak to and move the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. When I made the decision to stand for election to this Parliament, I did so because I believe that our nation's future is full of potential, and it is our job to ensure that that potential is not just spoken about in homes, parks and pubs across Scotland, but delivered upon by those of us fortunate enough to serve in this Parliament. That means good jobs and good wages. It means stronger businesses with the opportunity to grow. It means ensuring that the generations that follow our own enjoy better living standards than we do ourselves. And key to unlocking that opportunity, key to delivering that potential, is growing Scotland's economy. Now, for so many of my generation on these isles, and indeed those generations that have since followed, because it feels like there's been a fair few, an economy that works is something that they have neither seen nor felt. For they are the generation that entered the world of work during a global financial crisis, who lived through the austerity years of Cameron and Clegg that followed. And on that point, it's probably apt to give way to Rachel Hamilton.
Rachel Hamilton, although I would remind the member that the convention is that interventions aren't taken in a first speech, and it's Mr Flynn's first speech.
I apologise, but I'm very grateful for Stephen Flynn to take the intervention. Yes, but I was wondering if Mr Flynn would agree with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, who basically said we cannot tax ourselves to growth.
Stephen Flynn.
There's a certain irony in Rachel Hamilton presenting herself in debate on the point of austerity and the damage that was done by her party to the UK economy, to Scotland's economy, to Scottish families, and then choosing to blame others when she could have taken responsibility for the decisions of the Conservative government. But of course, it wasn't just the austerity years of Cameron and Clegg. We also were the generation who watched on hopelessly as Farage and Johnson dragged us from the European Union, who remained rooted to their homes during the pandemic, who grew angry as Vladimir Putin brought terror back to Europe and Liz Truss insanity to number 10. And I'm sure Mr Hoy is away to apologise to the Chamber for Liz Truss.
Craig Hoy.
I thank our newbie for giving way during his maiden speech, but will he now take this opportunity to apologise for the tens of thousands of oil and gas workers in the North East who have lost their jobs as a direct result of this government's failure to support our oil and gas sector?
Mr Hoy, I would remind you that you must treat all members with courtesy at all times. Stephen Flynn.
Well, firstly, I give Mr Hoy the opportunity to apologise for Liz Truss, and I notice that he chose not to do so, something that will sit heavily in the minds of voters across Scotland over the coming weeks, I have no doubt. But how dare a Conservative Party member, the party responsible for the Energy Profits Levy, the party responsible for their own failed environmental risk assessments that blocked the Rosebank project from being taken forward, come to this chamber and blame anyone else for their actions? The reality is that Scotland's oil and gas industry has contributed near £400 billion to his UK Treasury, and people have lost their jobs despite that. That is on him and his party, nobody else's, Deputy Presiding Officer. But back to that generation, because they are the ones who have been buffeted by events and promised change from Westminster throughout their adult lives, but who have never seen it being delivered. And let me be clear to this chamber that for as long as the great levers of any state over trade, migration, energy, tax and employment law are held by others far removed from Scotland's reach, we will always be held back from being able to deliver the full potential that a growing economy can deliver and that our nation deserves. And, Deputy Presiding Officer, that becomes ever more frustrating when we consider just how strong our foundations are, because be in no doubt, Scotland does start from a position of strength. Our nation is awash with investment and innovation, from the Saxford spaceport sat atop the very tip of the Shetland Isles in Uns to Centre Parks development down south by Hoyk. From the world-leading subsea oil and gas and renewables engineering of Aberdeen in the east to the glory of Scotland's malts in the Western Isles. Across Edinburgh and Glasgow lies financial institutions that are the envy of so many, and that's before we spread out across our lands in celebration of our food, farming and fishing. Indeed, all of us in this chamber could rightly celebrate, perhaps not Mr Hoy, all of us in this chamber could rightly celebrate success stories from each of our constituencies time and time again. We all know them, the local businesses with the global connections and the global brands. The task now is to use the powers that we do have to build upon those underlying strengths and channel it into growth that the Scottish public can feel. And that next phase of this government's delivery must be about pace, outcomes and reforms. As we have said, Scotland does not lack assets nor ambitions, but we do know that too often progress is slowed by the complexity of the state and the fragmented support systems that too often act as a barrier. Our job now is to cut through that complexity, to accelerate delivery and to align government, public bodies and partners behind the shared goal of higher sustainable growth, growth that is felt in people's day-to-day lives. First, we must continue to unlock investment. We all know that Scotland continues to have the highest levels of foreign direct investment outside of London. We all know that Scotland is a high-confidence, stable and attractive environment for many investors. We all know that it was the Scottish Government that put those conditions in place. But we can and we must go further to make Scotland the best place to do business in the UK, to create an environment where we can make it easier to turn investor interest into real projects and real jobs. And Deputy Presiding Officer, our Major Projects Office will help to make that vision a reality. Second, we must boost productivity. If we are serious about attracting investment, if we are serious about being the best place to do business on these isles, if we are serious about competing internationally, then we must continue to invest in making sure that the workforce of today is ready for the work of tomorrow. And skills are key when it comes to boosting productivity. That means working with our schools, colleges, universities, research institutions and businesses to ensure that our young people, those out of work and indeed those looking for a change, know exactly what skills they need and where best to get them to get on in life. But skills are, of course, only part of the story, because they are only worth having if there's somewhere to use them. And that's why, thirdly, we will back the industries of the future. And talking about the future, I'll give way to Willie Rennie.
Willie Rennie.
He's a charmer, isn't he? On the point of skills and workforce, what is his answer to the high levels of economic inactivity from the aged workforce of 16 to 64? Because I've not heard anything yet that gives me confidence that the government's on top of this issue.
Stephen Flynn.
I think that's an incredibly important point that Mr Rennie rightly makes, and it's no surprise that he's chosen to do so. I tried to reference to that in the remarks that I made in terms of working across institution, from the youngest ages to the oldest ages, and with business to ensure that we bring people together to make sure that they have the skills that are required in order to get back in to the workplace. I don't think anyone can put their hand up and say there's an easy answer in that regard, but what we are willing to do and what we will be willing to do is engage across this chamber and across civic and business society in Scotland to ensure that that happens. And I'm looking forward to working with him in that regard. But back to the industries of the future. Our vision must go beyond simply adopting new technologies to instead helping to create and commercialise them. Areas such as life sciences, digital, artificial intelligence, critical technologies such as quantum and phonics, advanced manufacturing and, of course, the energy transition offer major opportunities for high productivity and high value jobs. We must be able to build on our existing strengths in energy, engineering and innovation, while opening up new opportunities in sectors such as hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and yes, offshore wind. That is how growth is felt across generations, not just announced from a podium. And we must wrap our arm around the supply chain in those sectors to ensure that they grow, innovate, export and stay anchored right here, in Scotland, for Scotland. Our high-growth unit will help to make that scale-up possible, and it will sit directly adjacent to the office of the First Minister, so there will be nowhere to hide. Fourth, we will continue to expand Scotland's global reach. As a small, open economy, our long-term growth depends on selling more goods and services to the world and harnessing our export potential. That outward-looking tradition runs deep, and there is a golden opportunity to harness that export potential in the coming weeks with our biggest single export nation, as Scotland, of course, heads to America for the World Cup. We all know that success abroad will help bring success at home, and our task is to help more Scottish firms succeed in these global markets. Fifth, and I'm sure there will be agreement across the chamber in this regard, we must reform the system so it supports growth rather than holding it back. When done well, the planning system is an effective tool in delivering economic growth. But businesses and investors need a system that is quicker and gives more certainty. They need regulation that is more predictable and less complicated, and support that is less fragmented. Certainty breeds confidence, but risk and delay do the opposite. Reform matters because delivery matters, and because growth will only be felt if government acts with urgency, with clarity and with purpose. I will.
Graham Simpson.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking the intervention. He makes a very good point about speeding up the planning system, but we've been talking about this for years and years. So does he have any specific proposals to achieve that?
Stephen Flynn.
If Mr Simpson's been talking about it for years in this chamber and not been able to deliver it, that's maybe a reflection of his own abilities to do so. But I'm new here, and I give him the commitment that we can, and indeed we will. Because, in short, we want the planning system to act as an enabler rather than a barrier. Now, Deputy Presiding Officer, I am very conscious that if you live near Mossmoran right now, or Grangemouth, or in my home city of Aberdeen, you might feel that this all feels a mile away from your lived reality, where deindustrialisation is leaving you without hope for the future and without the certainty that you crave for your family. You want to hear that your jobs of today can be protected so that you can have access to the jobs of tomorrow. I want you to know that we hear you, and that we will do our part to deliver the opportunities for a future that you and your communities deserve. Now, none of that will be easy. We can shout about the energy profits levy that's choking investment and creating a cliff edge for jobs. We can yell that energy security matters, that jet fuel from Grangemouth would have been better than jet fuel from outside Scotland. But to be successful, we need Westminster to listen. And whilst they may well try to ignore this Parliament, know that we will not let them, because it matters too much to you and to Scotland's future. Presiding Officer, when I was elected to this Parliament, I could barely hide my delight, so much so that I couldn't even get my words out to be sworn in. And the reason I was so happy was because I believe that this Parliament can deliver on Scotland's potential. And to be a part of that story should be a special thing for all of us. A productive, dynamic, prosperous Scotland, where growth is a real thing that changes people's lives, and the jobs they can get, the homes they can afford, the businesses they can build, and the confidence they can have in their own future. And that is not just my mission. It should be this Parliament's mission. And I move the motion in my name.
I now call on Daniel Johnson to speak to and move Amendment 290.3.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm not sure if I've had the chance to welcome you to your place, but I do so now and repeat it. And can I also welcome the Cabinet Secretary to his place? For a first speech, I thought he did very well. But look, let me say that I agree with him, actually, in the fundamental points of his premise. That I believe that economic growth is important, because it is about the potential of this country, And that potential, I think, is measured in wages and jobs. And I think we need to all be focused on that. But it is complicated. And indeed, I welcome the fact that he has added to his portfolio transport, because I think in previous parliaments, the economy has been a brief that has been a name check, but not necessarily with the connections to the parts of policy that can actually directly impact economic growth. And so, I mean, in a sense, I don't envy his task, because it is complicated. It is a big portfolio and one that he has a task ahead of him. And it reminds me that I was once told by a former boss that he, given complexity, was not there to be liked, he was there to be effective. Can I say to the Cabinet Secretary, he's halfway there already. But look, I think if we're going to confront this, I think we need a bit of frankness and candour, as well as looking at the opportunities that we have in front of us. And first of all, I would say to the government, they need to confront some of the economic context they have in front of them. Time after time in this place, we have the point that made by the Fiscal Commission that there is a £785 million fiscal performance gap that they define as Scotland's wages growing more slowly than the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, just let's put this in context. That £785 million could fund Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, South of Scotland Enterprise, Scottish National Investment and SDS combined. So we need to address it, we need to confront it. We also need to acknowledge Scotland's relative economic performance. It is a fact that between 2014 and 2024, Scotland's economy grew by 8.4% compared to 14.3% across the UK. But let's be very clear. I think we need to be candid on all fronts. That correlates with a very significant decline in oil and gas extraction from the North Sea. Ultimately, what we need to do is recognise the scale of the oil and gas sector, the fact that it is a declining sector, whether you like it or not, because of geology, and focus on how we replace those jobs, because they are high-paid jobs, well above median wage, and we have a challenge there to replace them, regardless of our views on climate change. That is the reality of the North Sea. So in front of us, I think we need to focus on three core things. I'm happy to take an intervention.
Liam Carr.
I'm listening very carefully to his point. He'll presumably acknowledge that the Labour government's ban on new exploration and production is not going to help the oil and gas industry one bit.
Daniel Johnson.
And the member completely fails to acknowledge the bodged process that the last UK government put in place, which is why those licences ended up in the Supreme Court in the first place. So again, if I'm coming to the chamber with candour and honesty, I would ask the member does the same. I think we need to focus on three core things. One is around the economics of place. Second is around people and skills. And apologies, Mr Hoy, if I could make a little bit of progress. And all three, I think we have the powers here, but we fail to focus on them. On place, if we extend the examination on figures, we have parts of the United Kingdom where GDP per head is growing far faster than it is in Scotland. So Greater Manchester has a GDP per growth in recent years of 15.4%, West Yorkshire 7.5%, whereas Scotland has grown in a similar period by 4.3%. So I think we need to look at the government's pledges to put regional economic partnerships on a statutory footing, but we need to look at what will they do, how will they work, what power from this place will we push out so that they can actually deliver in partnership with industry. On people and skills, and I think the Cabinet Secretary was right to point this out, but the reality is that we have falling numbers of modern apprenticeship starts, and we have barely got going on the upskilling and reskilling. And yet we have to wait for the organisational reform of SDS into the Scottish Funding Council. And I worry that we will not have the scope or capacity to implement the changes that we need to do in terms of upskilling and reskilling, let alone the increasing difficulties that young people have getting into the workforce at all. And on partnership, and the Cabinet Secretary did reference this, but we need much greater focus in terms of the time and uncertainty that the government introduces into investment pipelines. Let's just take renewables. It takes 7 to 10 years to get projects from start to finish through the planning and consenting regime, in comparison to Norway, where it takes similar projects 3 to 4 years. We need a comprehensive mapping exercise from government, understanding where it has touch points, where it increases time and uncertainty. But more importantly, and I say this to people of all political parties, I think there is an overwhelming urge or tendency for politicians to assume that everyone from business is only driven by the profit motive. Actually, the profit motive is vital for business. And yes, we need to be cautious of profiteering, but ultimately we need to work in partnership and understand how businesses can generate a return, because that's what ultimately economic growth requires. My time is up, but I would say this. This is perhaps a hopeful start. We need a renewed discussion around the economy, one based around decentralisation, people and partnership. And with that, I will close. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Mr Johnson, could you move your amendment, please?
I thought I did at the beginning, but I moved the amendment in my name. Apologies.
Thank you. And I now call on Duncan Massey to speak to and move Amendment 290.2.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I move the amendment in my name, and of course I extend my congratulations also to Stephen Flynn on his new role as Cabinet Secretary. And I very much welcome this debate here today on growing Scotland's economy, because I believe that a focus on growth, a real, genuine focus on growth, has been desperately missing from this Parliament and certainly from SNP administrations for a long time. So I do hope that Mr Flynn does bring a fresh approach. I was actually encouraged by some of his words, so I'm thankful for that. Yeah. But because this Parliament should be united on one fundamental truth, and that is higher economic growth is essential. Essential if we're serious about delivering long-term prosperity for everyone, serious about driving jobs and opportunity for everyone, and serious about improving our public services for everyone. Yet the reality is Scotland today faces stagnant growth, causing stagnant wages and resulting in far too opportunities for people, especially young people. And I think too many people feel that the economy is simply not working for them and they don't have a future. And partly as a result, we now have unsustainable numbers of people out of work and reliant on benefits. You know, Scotland, with a working-age population of around 3.6 million, has only 2.6 million people in work. If after allowing for students, carers, retirees, those who can't work, we are still left with about 1 million people effectively. I'll move on with my arguments first, thank you. Around 500,000 people effectively locked out of opportunity and prosperity. And that is a national failure, and one that must be addressed by growth and coupled with reform of the benefit system. And another one of the core reasons for the underperformance is that Scotland has become the highest tax part of the UK, whether it's income tax, property taxes or other costs such as minimum unit pricing for alcohol. The cumulative burden is clear. Our tax system is too high, too complex. It is riddled with cliff edges that discourage people from taking on extra work or progressing in their careers. It makes Scotland less competitive and less attractive, particularly when we try to recruit skilled professionals from the rest of the UK. And nowhere is this clearer than in our NHS, where doctors and consultants are increasingly reluctant to take on additional shifts or even to relocate here. And, you know, the reality is simple. The most expensive purchase that any person makes in their life is not their home, their car or their holiday, it's their government. And unlike any purchase, they have no choice but to pay it. And indeed, last week we heard, thanks to the... Yes, I will.
George Adam.
Surely using the individual metaphor of the biggest purchase you'll make will be government. Surely using that, you can actually say that, well, every 5 years you get a chance in an election, and the SNP just won an overwhelming victory in the election, so he's talking complete and utter nonsense, is he not?
Mr Massey.
I'm not sure it was overwhelming, and I'm not sure that was a vote on the tax system of Scotland. Anyway, we heard last week, thanks to the Mandelson files, that this Labour government mainly sits around asking who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others. And if anything, this place seems to embrace this approach, but on steroids. Any thoughts of even controlling the benefits bill are totally forbidden. Sure.
Mr Roy.
Independent analysts have shown that the Scottish Child Payment is resulting in people choosing not to take on extra shifts, giving up work entirely and turning down pay rises. Will he therefore join with me in imposing a two-child benefit cap on the Scottish Child Payment?
Duncan Massey.
Be drawn on specific policies, but the whole benefit system obviously needs reviewed, and it's going to be a key part of this government. The other part of course, reason for the lack of growth is the high cost of our energy. And you know, despite some of the rhetoric we've heard about our energy system, what we have is a struggling system that is driving an ever more fragile grid, dependent on huge subsidies from the UK government, and driving some of the highest energy costs in the world, especially industrial energy prices. And that's hurting consumers, it's hurting businesses across the board, but most obviously we are deindustrialising at a rapid rate. And I was encouraged that we heard the fact that Grangemouth refinery was mentioned, that Musmoran was mentioned. The Alexander Dennis bus factory in Falkirk has also closed down, because we have made most energy-intensive businesses simply unviable here. And these problems are not caused by, gas price spikes. They are caused by net zero policies, and particularly very expensive subsidised intermittent renewables. Renewables are a welcome part of the mix, but the more accurate ONS figures show that we are simply not getting the jobs to replace these industries that are being shut down. And of course, North Sea oil and gas, we've talked about it. One of our great industries which has driven so much engineering excellence, is being crushed by deliberate policy choices. Whether that is the presumption against new oil and gas of the SNP, the continuing refusal of this Scottish Government to unambiguously back new projects or new drilling, and of course the EPL introduced by the Tories, increased by Labour and supported by virtually everyone in the chamber, apart from Reform. Sure.
Liam Kerr.
I just wonder if the member would confirm that whilst he was a member of the Conservative Party and got his start in politics with the Conservative Party, he unequivocally backed Conservative Party policy.
Duncan Massey.
No, of course I didn't, and that's one of the main reasons I left. Let's move on to another area. Let's talk about Europe. It seems to be a matter of faith in this place that somehow a failing, declining EU is some great place to be. I would highlight that over the period since Brexit, Britain had higher GDP. Not just yet, I'll expand my argument. I would highlight that over the period since Brexit, Britain has had a higher GDP growth than all the other major EU economies, admittedly well behind the fast-growing economies of the world, such as America and across Asia. The well-known meme goes like this: the US innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. And this is now very unfair on China, who one could say is now innovating the entire world, but is perfectly fair on the EU, which is now a sick man blocking innovation across the board, such as AI, and with the exception of nuclear France, is energy poor, resource poor, has an ageing population and limited military capability. It's now only 13% of global GDP, and like the Titanic, it's going down to irrelevance. The tragedy is that many people here want to get back on. I'll take the intervention.
Mr Massey, I'm afraid you're in your closing few seconds, please. Thank you.
Yes, I will close there. Thank you. I agree, Scotland does have enormous potential. We are blessed with many business sectors that are genuinely world-class, have great potential to move on, but we're not realising that potential. Scotland, once again, needs to be one of the best places in the world to do business, for people to invest and for people to come and work. We must fix our tax system. We've got to be competitive again. That means getting rid of the 6 bands and moving back to 3 bands, removing the punitive cliff edges and aligning rates to at least the level of the UK. Second, we need at least a pragmatic energy policy, one focused on delivering cheap, abundant, reliable energy. And third, we also need to maximise our oil and gas resources in the short and medium term, while planning for a transition that includes nuclear power, with renewables playing a complementary, not dominant role. And we must also ensure that our benefit system, I'll conclude, we must reform our benefit system to ensure that work always pays and all opportunities are always there for everyone. So we must be a Scotland where young people, whether
I'm sorry, Mr Massey, you have to...
This is the last sentence.
I'm afraid you've had 2 last sentences already. I was giving you extra time because you took the intervention, so sorry about that. We'll move on now. I should let the Chamber know that we are running quite a bit behind time now, but I call Patrick Harvey to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Mr Harvey, up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I congratulate Stephen Flynn on his appointment. It's going to be his first opportunity to hear my traditional rant about the ideology of economic growth. Others have been listening to this for decades from me, and this is his first chance. I'm sure he's been looking forward to it. But Greens are far from alone in criticising the myopic approach to measuring GDP. We recognise that some economic activity is good for our health, good for our environment, generates wealth that's fairly shared and that rewards workers with secure jobs, rights and protections in the workplace and high levels of local ownership. There is also economic activity which undermines our health, degrades our environment, exploits the workforce and enriches remote corporate interests. So the focus on growth as a simplistic measurement, it measures everything that's good and everything that's bad for people and pretends that it's all of equal value. It's a simplistic metric. And focusing on this alone is the wrong target for a government that cares about people's well-being. Now, the Scottish Government, the SNP, certainly never fully shared the Green critique of growth, but they did begin to move in the right direction. The National Performance Framework recognises wider economic indicators, even if it did keep GDP on a pedestal. As First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon placed a strong emphasis on the concept of a well-being economy, working with, for example, Iceland and New Zealand to create the Wellbeing Economy Governance Group. In her TED Talk in 2019, Nicola Sturgeon said that the time for GDP to be seen as the only measure of a country's success was over. And as recently as January 2024, the Scottish Government backed a motion in Parliament setting out the aim of a fair, green, well-being economy in Scotland. Now, the SNP's position was never an outright rejection of growth, and indeed even the Green position is often misrepresented. In reality, as our amendment makes clear, which I move now, there are certainly areas where our economic activity should increase. But we do argue that an increase for its own sake, that takes place regardless of who benefits or regardless of who bears the social and environmental costs, is the wrong goal to pursue. So while there were always differences between the Green and the SNP position, today's motion looks like a complete reversal of the Scottish Government's previous direction of travel. It reads as a repudiation of its previous work on the concept of a well-being economy. A regressive change compared to the last decade. And Stephen Flynn's speech doesn't give so much as a nod to the previous progressive track record. Now, there will, of course, I'll give way.
Member for giving way. And I'm going to try and seek some consensus here. Surely grounding a view of growth is grounded in jobs and wages and opportunity is perhaps some compromise between the position he's articulating and those maybe in other parts of the chamber.
Patrick Harvey.
There are certainly better ways to think of that, and I'll come on to it later. But the record across decades in Europe is that long-term economic growth has benefited the 1% vastly more than the large majority of the population. Now, there will be those who say that all growth is good growth, and it simply doesn't matter if a tiny number of people become immensely wealthy while others are hungry and homeless. Or it doesn't matter if growth comes from depletion of finite resources. For example, the Cabinet Secretary's remarks today seem to suggest that he no longer even supports environmental impact assessments and that Rosebank should have been approved without them. It may be that some people think growth is desirable even if it continues the destruction of our ecosystem. But the world is already finding out just how self-defeating that argument is. The UK's National Security Assessment on ecosystem collapse and biodiversity loss shows the scale of the crisis that has been brought about by the current economic model, and it illustrates that the economy is in fact wholly dependent on a healthy environment and a fairly functioning society, with up to 12% of GDP at risk as a result of ecosystem collapse, and that's just by 2030, just a few years away. A reckoning is needed with the profound failure of the old economic model, which has left us with a legacy of poverty and inequality, hollowed out public services, public infrastructure in private hands, and a climate and nature crisis. A reckoning is also needed with the political model which enabled that economic system. A political model which has spent decades handing away power which should be democratically accountable to corporations and markets. Dare I say it, it's time to take back control. New thinking is emerging. The Global Justice Report mentioned in the Green Amendment makes the case that a global transformation that does reconcile planetary habitability and high standards of well-being for all people is possible, but it depends on rapid decarbonisation, a shift away from overconsumption towards sufficiency, as well as a dramatic reduction in inequality. It certainly would be bad for the billionaire class, but it would be a path to better shared prosperity for the vast majority of the world's population than they have access today. And what we need, Presiding Officer, is a government with that same willingness to confront the failures of the current dominant failed economic system, and with the vision and ambition to bring new thinking to the challenge. This country does have huge potential to meet the needs of all our people without trashing our life support system, to contribute to the well-being of others around the world without allowing a tiny number to hoard the wealth that we all generate together. There will be things that we need to see grow: clean energy, nature restoration, efficient resource use, as well as the social capacity that improves everyone's lives, from health and care to education and culture. Growth of those things which improve our lives, which help people to help one another and protect the world we all depend on, that is healthy growth. But growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. I urge the Government to rediscover that understanding, which for a few years it was beginning to embrace. And I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you. I now call Rachel Hamilton, to be followed by Liam MacArthur. Rachel Hamilton to speak and to move Amendment 290.5.
Presiding Officer, thank you, and I move the amendment in my name. And our amendment presents a laser focus on Scotland's economic potential. And may I welcome Stephen Flynn to his role and congratulate him on his maiden speech. I appreciate this may sound obvious, Presiding Officer, but after nearly 2 decades of SNP government, it is worth restating the basics. Now, prosperity means improved services, like building new schools, saving swimming pools, the kind of obvious that all of us are talking about in our own constituencies. It means ensuring that we improve people's life chances. It means job creation. But under the SNP, the economic landscape does look perilous. Scotland's economic growth has lagged behind the rest of the UK by 12 billion since the SNP took power. And their failure to grow the economy means that despite Scots being the highest part of the tax part of the UK, only half of this gets to public services. Now, we do need sound fiscal management, but how can we accept that a party of John Swinney and Peter Murrell and Colin Beattie are fiscally responsible? They have left this country with a deficit, with a black hole reaching 5 billion by the end of the decade, and spending is growing faster than revenue. It leaves less money, as I said, for infrastructure such as dualling the A9 and essential housing projects, energy projects, supporting jobs and investment. It is fantasy economics. It's a dangerous game to be playing with Scotland's future. But instead of fixing these problems, the SNP are obsessed with another dangerous game. The very first vote of this session was a symbolic vote on the Constitution, and that clearly sends the wrong message to businesses. A vote which Sir Tom Hunter warned will have people ask themselves, should I invest in Scotland Or is there something going on politically that makes it a bit politically unstable? And that is the wrong message to send businesses. I know there are business representatives in the gallery today, and they want to see Scotland succeed. We know that for the SNP, economic growth has always played second fiddle to breaking up the United Kingdom. But now to Mr Flynn. At Westminster, as a backbencher, he could shout from the sidelines and show off his leadership potential. But of course, he could dodge any blame for SNP policies. Now he has the responsibility to deliver for business, and there is no hiding. The business sector is watching. And in a recent interview, he criticised the fact that Scotland is the highest tax part of the UK, despite it being his own government's policy. The business community say there's no direction of travel for Scotland's long-term growth. The previous Finance Committee concluded that economic strategies have not delivered the scale of growth promised, and Audit Scotland said they are concerned about the SNP's unclear and weak delivery mechanisms. And unlike the SNP motion, my party highlights Scotland's key sectors, such as oil and gas, energy, food and drink, financial services and space. And nowhere is that security more at stake than in our oil and gas sector, and in Aberdeen, the city that built it. When I spoke to voters in Aberdeen South, I heard firsthand the pain and turmoil being caused by the SNP's presumption against oil and gas. Livelihoods being lost, 1,000 jobs being lost per month. That is shocking. This is not serious economic policy. It is the exporting of Scottish jobs, prosperity and growth for political posturing. I will.
Jack Middleton.
Hamilton accept that the energy profits levy introduced by the Conservative government is costing 1,000 jobs a month across the sector. Well, what's their explanation for that, can I ask, Presiding Officer?
Rachel Hamilton.
An interesting intervention from Jack Middleton, Presiding Officer. I wonder if he supports the introduction of licences for Jackdaw and Rosebank. And we're coming on to Jack Middleton, so he can just listen up on non-domestic rates. You can get your intervention ready, Mr Middleton. So, since Stephen Flynn has landed at Holyrood, he must find it pretty shameful that his own party disagrees with him and are refusing to remove their presumption against oil and gas to protect those jobs in the North East. Any party that claims to support economic growth must support our oil and gas sector in Aberdeen. Now, the other concern that I have is that 80% of Scots think income tax should be the same or lower than the rest of the United Kingdom. It's one of the top concerns with business owners in Scotland. The Chamber of Commerce, the CBI, the IFS, the Fraser of Allen Institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants and many more have argued time and time again that the SNP government have a complicated high tax regime. It's damaging our growth, it's damaging prosperity. Moving on to non-domestic rates, while I have the short time left, Presiding Officer, former SNP SPAD Jack Middleton said there are clear flaws in his party's business rate revaluation, which led to 412 businesses having rises over 1,000%. He's quiet now, isn't he, Presiding Officer? It's a bit like an arsonist helping the SNP ministers pour petrol over a burning fire and not calling the fire service. Now, constituents in my constituency have been in touch about these damaging non-domestic rates. A constituent from Berwickshire contacted me to tell me that the draft rateable value could be more than double. And at a time when energy and other costs are rising, that is very worrying. And we know that the Scottish Hospitality Group have said that the Scottish Government and local authorities must urgently fix this issue. They must urgently fix the immediate implementation failures on rates relief. I see time is marching on, Presiding Officer. I will close there. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the final of the opening speeches and I ask Liam MacArthur to speak to and move Amendment 290.1.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I join with others in welcoming the Cabinet Secretary to his post and commend him on his first speech. Daniel Johnson talked about a hopeful start. I'm not sure whether he retains that hope since he sat down. But anyway, I welcome the debate that we're having around economic growth. Very often it's a debate that we have that is framed in the context of cities and city regions. I think I would absolve the Cabinet Secretary from that in his remarks. I think he recognised that the role of our rural and island communities, which are often, I think, underestimated, undervalued, whether in terms of their contribution, their ambition or their innovation. But I think if we look at many of the key sectors in our economy, whether that be energy, food and drink, the creative sector, tourism, tourism and space, these are sectors that are driving our economy, and they're areas in which I think our rural and island communities can lay claim to be punching above their weight. But very often I think the argument will be made that as well as they are doing, they are not able to fulfil their potentials because they're being held back. Whether that's the slow and patchy progress in the rollout of digital infrastructure, whether that's a transport network where we see delays in the dualling of the A9, we see a ferry network that has been underinvested in and we're seeing the chaos arising from that, or indeed even in cuts in air services, which I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for engaging with me on, but again I think hold back our rural and island areas, or indeed in the area of housing, where I think there's a specific dimension to the housing crisis that we're seeing across the country in rural and island areas. We see it too in terms of care, whether that's social care and childcare, not just in the failure, the inability to meet the needs of those in receipt of care, but actually the impact it has in drawing out people who would otherwise be in the workforce, who are having to take on those caring roles because the support isn't available. And also through centralised procurement, which I understand and acknowledge can have benefits, but very often in areas like the one I represent, add to the cost and crowd out opportunities for businesses to grow and expand and develop jobs and value. Support will be needed, funding will be needed, but often in rural and island areas this is seen as some sort of subsidy, where in every other part of the country it's recognised as an investment. And that is investment that's key for Scotland and UK achieving its ambitions, whether that's in terms of the economy or whether it's in terms of the transition to net zero, what we've heard quite a bit about in this debate. Islands are part of what makes Scotland, Scotland. I think this is exemplified in my own Orkney constituency, where I think pretty consistently over the years I have represented those islands. Colleagues across the chamber who've been fortunate enough to be on visits to Orkney have reflected on the can-do attitude of the people that live there. I think we have a track record of delivering on quality and delivering on change and delivering on innovation. But again, too often, that is held back, very often by a one-size-fits-all approach to either policy or regulation, which is unnecessary in terms of meeting our wider obligations and ambitions, but stems from, I think, a sense of administrative simplicity rather than what is best either for Orkney or indeed for the country as a whole. And of course, SMEs are the lifeblood of somewhere like Orkney. There are very few large companies. They have faced shocks such as those on business rates already mentioned in this debate. And while action was taken in the last budget, not least due to the intervention of Liberal Democrats, I think the FSB and others are quite right to be calling for much wider reform. And to the amendment in my name, which highlights the costs of Brexit's cost to Orkney, to Scotland, to the wider UK costs, which are estimated between 100 and 200 billion a year by Bloomberg Economics, but cost to the EU as well. I lived and worked in Brussels for around 5 years. I know that there's a recognition of the mutual disadvantage that has arisen from this breakage. The future relationship with the EU, though, is not simply ours to determine. EU member states have a view in that debate, but mutual self-interest surely depends on rebuilding ties. We've seen positive signs already, those are welcome, but we must go further, and the customs union referred to in my amendment, which I move, can help reduce trade friction, benefit SMEs, benefit, as I say, communities in rural and island areas, but across the country too, and I would urge Parliament to support that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the open debate, and I call Karen Adams, to be followed by Jenny Round.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I firstly want to welcome the Cabinet Secretary to his new post. It was great to see you in this Parliament. Presiding Officer, when we talk about the economy, it can sometimes feel like we're talking about something that's quite abstract, something separate from people's everyday lives. It sounds technical and distant, full of forecasts and figures, and a language that doesn't always mean that much to the people who are living with dire consequences of some disastrous economic decisions. But the word economy has its roots in the management of resources, and I think that's a useful reminder. Growing an economy should never be just about producing more wealth somewhere for someone. It should be about how we use Scotland's resources, develop our skills, support our industries, and make sure our communities benefit from it all. And that is the question that I come back to. Who is this growth for? When I think about economic growth in Banffshire and Bucking Coast, I don't think first about a graph or a statistic. I think about the young folk in Buckie, wondering whether they're going to be a good job for them if they stay in their hometown. I think about the folk across the constituency deciding what skills that they want to build at the local NES call, whether that takes them into fishing, engineering, offshore renewables, construction, care, education, local business and enterprise. And I think about the folk who want to raise their families in the towns that they grew up in because they can see opportunity there, stability, a decent standard of living and a future for those who come after them. And that is what economic growth has to mean in real life. In my constituency, I see that potential everywhere. Fraserburgh Harbour has a master plan looking to future-proof one of Scotland's key fishing ports. Peterhead Port is already a massive asset for Scotland with links to fishing, energy and trade. In Buckie, Macduff, Fraserburgh, Peterhead, right along the coastline, our harbours, ports and communities all have a part to play in Scotland's economic future, and we must protect it. If we do want that growth to be meaningful, we need to connect the dots, and we cannot look at economic cases and business plans in silos. And that is why the economic case, for example, for the campaign for North East Rail really matters. Peterhead and Fraserburgh are two of Scotland's largest towns without a rail link, and that's not just a transport issue, it's an economic issue. It affects access to education, work, freight, business confidence, and how quickly and cleanly produce from one of Europe's most important fishing ports can reach the market. Now that, to me, is what sustainable and inclusive growth should look like. Not just growth that appears in national figures, but growth that reaches the communities, workers and businesses that helped create it. And that's also why I think the North East... Yes, I will.
Liam Kerr.
I'm very grateful. I find myself in very strong agreement with her on the benefits of North East Rail and the Buchan Line being relayed as called for by CNER. What would she have the government do about this, though? Because I certainly think the government needs to be doing proper case studies and get on with relaying the line.
Karen Adam.
Member for that intervention, because it gives me the opportunity to say that I've already opened up conversations and we are going to be discussing what the campaign are asking for in their next steps, because it was in the SNP manifesto that that support was going to be there for them. So I look forward to working cross-party to see if we can help get that delivered. So I think that's why the North East needs a stronger and more bespoke economic focus. We have Highlands and Islands enterprise, we have South of Scotland enterprise, we have Scottish enterprise working nationally. I'm sorry, I'll just make way at the moment, but I will come back. But the North East has its own mix of industries, pressures and opportunities, and that deserves focused attention. The North East is not waiting for somebody to come and fix everything. The people and the businesses, ideas and work ethic, they are already there. What they need is the right support, connections and doors opened. And if we are serious about removing barriers to success, we have to listen to the people, businesses and communities who know what those barriers are. Now, there are, of course, limits to what Scotland can do while key powers remain at Westminster, such as energy policy, immigration, major fiscal levers and big parts of economic decision-making. That matters when energy-rich communities still face fuel poverty, and it matters when local businesses struggle to recruit, when care services need staff, and when schools need teachers, and when rural and coastal communities need policy that reflects their reality. And that is why independence matters in this debate, as a practical question of whether Scotland has the powers to build an economy around Scotland's own needs. But we have responsibilities now. and we should use every power we have to support enterprise, investment, innovation and trade. Growth cannot just be about numbers on paper. It has to mean better lives, fewer children in poverty, stronger public services, healthier towns, better jobs and communities where people feel proud to stay, work, raise families and build something lasting. What Banffshire and Buchan Coast needs is support to turn its potential into prosperity that is seen and felt locally. Now, Presiding Officer, in conclusion, that is the kind of economic growth I want for Scotland. Growth with purpose, growth that reaches people and growth that strengthens the places that we all call home. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Jenny Young to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
I welcome today's debate on economic growth. It is one of, if not the most important topic for this place to address. If the government can concentrate on driving up economic growth for the next 5 years, that will be 5 years well spent for the sake of our fellow citizens, businesses and, of course, public services. But to do that, we must confront and address the fact that earnings and employment growth in Scotland are lagging behind the rest of the UK. As my colleague Daniel Johnson already laid out, the Scottish Fiscal Commission project that in 2026 and 2027 alone, that economic performance gap will be £785 million. That is a reality that we need to confront. It cannot be wished away, and populists of various political stripes have ill-served our people and our economy by pretending otherwise. We also need government to recognise the convening power that it does possess. Business rates is a key example of where this government should be a much more constructive partner with businesses, in contrast to the track record of the last few years, with reliefs not passed on in full and a recent damaging revaluation acknowledged by many across the chamber. And even as AI and technology play an ever greater role in the economy, we simply cannot deliver economic growth without recognising that it is people who make our economy turn. As a proud trade unionist and GMB member, an interest which I will happily declare now, I know that that is the case. There are huge skills shortages in our economy. But there are also huge numbers of people, particularly young people, as others have said, who are not currently in education, employment or training. There is huge untapped potential in our economy that I feel this government is not doing enough to unlock. This is undoubtedly a time of economic transition, as others have said, primarily in our energy sector, but of course with impacts for the wider economy. Colleges should be in prime position to work with businesses and support those transitions by training and retraining workers. But instead, over the last parliamentary session, the SNP cut college funding by 20%. The Scottish Funding Council now estimates that 22 out of Scotland's 24 colleges are not sustainable. Just when our economy, businesses and workers need colleges the most, colleges the length and breadth of Scotland are having to cut costs, let staff go and scale back. Yesterday, I met with Forth Valley College Principal Kenny McInnes at the college's... happily.
I thank Jenny Young for taking the intervention. Many of the colleges that I speak to in the constituency are citing the employer national insurance contribution by a Labour government as one of the reasons that they are not investing into their people and also employees and skills. I'm wondering what the representation that the member is going to make to the UK government to scrap that.
So the member will be well aware that when we inherited the financial and economic mess that the Tories left in 2024, we had to make difficult decisions to fund the NHS and to fund public services.
No credibility.
And I'm sure she will agree with me that actually it is this government that has done the most damage to our colleges. 20% cut to funding in 5 years. How are they supposed to fix that? I would ask that question to the member. So, as I say, I met with Forth Valley College Principal Kenny McInnes at the college's campus in Falkirk yesterday. That campus has long specialised in construction and engineering, which are two vital sectors for our economy nationally, but also locally in my region with the proximity to Grangemouth. Now, if this government's talk of a just transition and economic growth meant anything, they would not be seeing the college nearest to Grangemouth forced to scale back at this critical moment for the region I represent. The injection of funding from the Scottish Government in the 26-27 budget did not repair the damage done to Scotland's colleges by that 20% cut, and a spending review promising flat cash, which is in reality a cut, gives no light at the end of the tunnel for Scotland's colleges. If the Scottish Government is serious about growing Scotland's economy, and I sincerely hope that it is, then colleges must not be left to wither on the vine. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Stuart McMillan to be followed by Laura Mitchell.
Very much, Presiding Officer. Without a successful economy, we really are going to struggle to deal with the many challenges that the country actually faces. Of course, Scotland currently has limited powers, but without the powers of a normal independent nation, there will always be limitations placed upon this government. However, with the powers that we do have, the Scottish Government, the SNP Scottish Government, actually has delivered a great deal. Since 2007, GDP and productivity growth in Scotland has outpaced the rest of the UK. Scotland is the top destination in the UK for foreign direct investment outside of London for the 10th year running, according to EY's latest attractiveness study. In 2025, Edinburgh, this city, outperformed London for the first time, and thanks to the sustained focus by the SNP through policies like TechScaler, Scotland is by far the fastest growing start-up economy in the UK and one of the fastest growing in Europe.
Rachel Hamilton.
Scotland actually ranks 8th out of the UK in FDI. Can the member clarify if he means that the number of projects being invested in is the highest, not the economic delivery financially?
Stuart McMillan.
No, I think certainly I'm not going to stand here and do the research for Rachel Hamilton. I'm sure Rachel Hamilton can actually go and do the research herself. But, Presiding Officer, every MSP should actually welcome this information, these facts. Presiding Officer, the SNP have never, ever lacked ambition for this country, and that's why we actually want independence, to fully harness the opportunity and also the potential. But once again, within the limitations of devolution, establishing and maintaining the small business bonus scheme has actually been vital. The FSB Scotland supports it, and 98% of private sector businesses in Scotland benefit from it. But I absolutely welcome the commitment that non-domestic rates, that system will be realigned with businesses like Amazon actually paying their fair share and contributing to communities. It's a point that Daniel Johnson touched upon earlier regarding businesses and profits, and I agree with him on that particular point. Now, given Amazon used to operate in my constituency, I know how important the jobs actually were for my constituents, but also know how the community was so badly let down by them when they left. The same can be said for EE when they left Greenock in recent years, and also profitable Cigna Healthcare. They've recently announced some job losses in Greenock and also Glasgow. The galling thing about this in particular is the fact that some of these jobs are already being advertised in other countries. But despite these two companies leaving and also the Cigna Healthcare information, the Scottish Government actually has helped safeguard and create jobs in Inverclyde. This kind of touches upon the Green Amendment that Patrick Harvey spoke about regarding the government action. When Texas Instruments announced their intention to leave the profitable Greenock site, the Scottish Government worked with its agencies and also Inverclyde Council to find a buyer. They put together a £40 million package to help safeguard highly skilled jobs and also brought diodes to the table, who also invested significantly. These jobs remain locally. The Scottish Government has also helped Ferguson Marine, and notwithstanding some of the utter nonsense spoken and written about the yard, the undeniable fact is the yard remains open, the jobs are saved, more apprenticeships have been created, and the yard has a future. These two investments alone have actually helped my local community and economy. But investing in our homegrown businesses is absolutely crucial, as is inward investment. And this is yet another reason why that the Scottish Government having offices in other nations is so important. So when considering investment, the easy option is to focus on cities. And like Liam MacArthur, I've already taken an intervention, and like Liam MacArthur, who quite rightly touched upon the point regarding island and rural communities, which I absolutely agree with him on, I think there's also aspects regarding places like mine, the post-industrial towns with some villages that also there may well be that expectation that we should also be commuters to Glasgow. I don't think we should all be commuters to a city. There's an economic opportunity with the West College Scotland Greenock campus being at the centre of that. Now, Karen Adam touched upon this in her comments. Now, we've got a college building that's long past its sell-by date. However, there is a cross-party willingness and consensus locally to work together to find a solution to deliver a college infrastructure to drive the economic change. So this is about assisting not about the government stepping in. This will ensure Inverclyde is sustainable, assisting more people into employment and upskilling more of my constituents. A creative solution has actually been discussed, and these options will now be going to the SFC. And I feel I support the college and the ambition, and also will continue my engagement with the Scottish Government on this. Successful local economies do come in many guises, and the creative regeneration in my constituency are also an example of a scale who are using the arts, culture, heritage and science to both engage and educate, in addition to improving economic opportunities. The biggest project by far is the purchase of the Glebe, part of a former sugar refinery, to turn it into a multi-use creative space, which will also be a great economic driver. Now, this type of community regeneration is ambitious, but also deliverable. There's much more I can say about Inverclyde's economic challenges and also opportunities, but I know that we generally are at a turning point. So from 1980s Tory decimation of the shipbuilding industry, and people were forced to leave to go on their bike and go and find somewhere else to get a job. There is now a real economic opportunity of regeneration in Inverclyde with the college at its heart. Thank you.
I call Laura Mitchell to be followed by Lloyd Melville.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak in this debate and to have the chance to share some reflections on the key economic challenges and opportunities in my own constituency. Every member in this chamber will have had countless conversations with constituents who feel the economy just isn't working for them. Wages are not keeping up with inflation, energy costs in an energy-rich nation are soaring, and home ownership is out of reach for far too many young people. So people look around and they see a UK economic model that is broken, and the impact is felt by workers, public services and businesses in Moray and right across the country. Of course, the context is important, and as the Cabinet Secretary set out, in recent times, households and businesses have lived through an unprecedented number of unprecedented events. 15 years of Tory austerity, Brexit, a global pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Liz Truss mini-budget, and now events in the Middle East. Sure.
Liam Kerr.
Lived through the appalling SNP rates regime, and the FSB say that the most recent rates revaluation has seen significant increases to bills, and it is urgent that the eligibility thresholds are revisited. Does the member agree, and if so, will she urge the government to do so?
The member would have a little patience. I'm going to come on to non-domestic rates and further on in my remarks. I'll carry on. And as household costs have soared, so too has the cost of doing business. Inflation and energy costs are obviously a key driver, but businesses across Moray tell me that so too are UK government economic choices. The hike in employers' national insurance contributions is a tax on jobs, and employers large and small are feeling the pain. Hostile immigration policies are leading to skills shortages in key sectors in my rural communities. Increases in duty on Scotch whisky is a policy that specifically prevents investment and growth in Speyside, the region that I represent. And hospitality businesses are struggling to cope with the 20% rate of VAT, something that Faith Holding of Scribbles in my constituency has been campaigning hard on and deserves great credit for. And I note my colleague Alan Smith has tabled a motion on this issue, and I hope that members across the chamber will get behind that motion. Despite these challenges, businesses in Moray have shown remarkable resilience and ambition. Businesses in my community want to invest, they want to grow, they want to create more jobs. In a challenging environment, business owners in Moray are working together to do just that. And in that vein, I welcome the Government's commitment to rebalance the non-domestic rate system. Whilst the relief on offer in Scotland is the most generous in the UK, many businesses do feel the current system deters them from growing and can be complex to navigate. So reviewing the system would be a boost for businesses, high streets and town centres up and down the country, and I look forward to discussing that with the Government in the weeks and months ahead. But as well as challenges, Scotland has tremendous opportunities. The economic opportunities of the transition to cleaner energy are enormous, and as set out by my local Chamber of Commerce in its ambitious business plan for Moray, our region wants to be at the heart of that. Not only do we have an abundance of natural resources on our doorstep, but we also have incredible expertise in our offshore and supply chain workforce. Many of my constituents have worked for decades offshore and have the skills required to make a huge contribution to the businesses of the future. It is therefore deeply regrettable that the UK Government's continued policy of the hated Energy Profits Levy continues to cost thousands of jobs per month in the North East. The First Minister's renewed focus on growing Scotland's economy and building on what the SNP in government has already delivered, as Stuart McMillan eloquently set out, and I'm particularly interested to see how plans to empower regional economic partnerships develop and how this can lead to strategic investment in rural communities like mine. Of course, creating the prosperous country we all want to see would be considerably more easy if this Parliament had the full economic levers of an independent country, but I know that this new government will use the powers of this Parliament to drive forward its ambitious agenda for Scotland, to ensure we're building an economy that can support strong public services and, crucially, building an economy that people feel works for them.
I call Lloyd Melville to be followed by Heather Anderson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the Cabinet Secretary set out, Scotland has never lacked ideas and ambition. We have world-class universities, skilled workers, energy, science, engineering and creativity. Across this country, people are building things of real value. Now, the question is not whether Scotland can create, it's whether Scotland can turn what we create into real growth. The countries that succeed don't leave growth to chance. They choose where they can lead. Then they build the markets, the skills and the industrial muscle to make it happen. That is how ideas become industries and ambition becomes national wealth. Now, there is a quiet danger in our economy. Scotland could become the place where new ideas are born, but not where their value is owned. Where companies start, where invention happens, but wealth moves elsewhere. Presiding Officer, Scotland's scale-up firms make up a small share of our business base, but together they employ almost 250,000 people and generate more than £60 billion in turnover, according to Scale Up Britain. No thank you. If we are serious about growth, we cannot only ask how many firms start here, we must ask how many grow here, decide here and build wealth here. A business that begins here in Scotland should not have to leave Scotland to become world-class. And Scotland should not settle for a future of insecure gig work while the real value is owned elsewhere. Growth must mean skilled jobs, secured work and industries rooted here in Scotland. Now, offshore wind shows what is at stake. Scotland has the resource, the skills and the industrial inheritance to lead the next energy age. But turbines in Scottish waters are not the same as wealth in Scotland's hands. If the value work is designed elsewhere, built elsewhere and owned elsewhere, then Scotland will have hosted the opportunity while others captured the prize. Now, Presiding Officer, that is why Scotland needs the discipline to capture the economic opportunities ahead of us. We need to make Scotland impossible for investors to ignore. Private capital doesn't move simply because politicians ask nicely. It moves when firms have customers, revenue and a clear route to growth. And public capital should help us share risk, give confidence and put larger funds into Scottish deals. And yes, we should ask why more of Scotland's long-term capital, like pension funds, are not backing our long-term ambition. Government must also become a better first customer. The public sector buys billions of pounds of goods and services every year. That's not just administration, it's economic power. So when the NHS buys technology, when councils retrofit homes, when public bodies invest in digital systems, we should all be asking, how does this help a Scottish firm to prove itself? Every public pound should work twice. Once to buy the service we need, and then again to build the economy that we want. And we must build the places where firms can grow. A company can't expand without space, homes for workers, and the planning and infrastructure to match their ambition. Ardersier, Nig and Kishorn show what that means in practice. Ports, power, land, skills and supply chains ready to receive investment and generate growth. Now, Presiding Officer, of course, Scotland does not yet control every lever of the economy. And when a £1.5 billion investment in wind turbine manufacturing can be blocked by the UK Government, we are reminded that even Scotland's industrial opportunities depend on decisions taken elsewhere. Now, those limits are real, but limits must never become a habit of mind. Devolution gives us tools, but independence would give us the full toolbox. No one should mistake the constraints of devolution for an excuse to think small. With the powers we have, we can put investment behind ambition, make public money work harder, and turn buying power into economic strength. In closing, Presiding Officer, the future will not belong to the countries that simply host the transition. It will belong to the countries that build it. Scotland must be one of them, not just a country of invention, a country of industry. Not just firms that start here, but firms that scale here. Not just wealth created in Scotland, wealth held in Scotland. That is how we will create the dynamic, growing economy that Scotland needs. Thank you.
We now move to the final speech in the open debate, and I call Heather Anderson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As one of the few people in this chamber who's run a medium-sized business for 15 years, I just want to start by expressing my admiration and support for everybody in Scotland who's had the courage and determination to start up and run a business. As everyone out there who knows what it takes to cover the wages every month knows, we've certainly withstood enormous shocks since the financial crash in 2008. We've traded through the economic disaster of Brexit. We were dragged out of the world's largest free market against our will. My food business imported fresh fruit and veg every week, and we certainly felt the impact. The UK now has the unique distinction of being the first country in the world to impose economic sanctions on itself. Like other food businesses, we then traded through COVID and somehow came out the other side. Now, we sold a farm a few years ago, but my heart still stopped when I heard Rachel Reeves announce the employer's national insurance hikes, because I knew immediately how that affected the bottom line of every hospitality and retail business in Scotland. And now we're going through another wave of energy price spikes, and I applaud everything our government is doing to continue to support medium and small businesses and large businesses across Scotland. But, Presiding Officer, the focus of my contribution in today's debate is the huge opportunity Scotland's economy has been given with the vast renewable resources it has. In such an uncertain world, homegrown renewable energy is our path to energy security, more affordable bills, long-term economic growth and environmental resilience. Having won the energy lottery yet again, Scotland's renewable sector already supports 24,000 jobs, and every gigawatt of new offshore wind capacity delivers around £2 to £3 billion to the economy. Renewable energy production has tripled in the last 10 years, and renewable energy is now one of the cheapest and fastest ways to generate energy at scale. I'm very conscious of the time, so I'll continue. That's because our natural resources aren't globally traded or subject to volatile price hikes. New onshore wind is now half the cost of new gas, and new offshore wind is 40% cheaper. Yes, right now the price of electricity is coupled to the price of gas, and that makes electricity artificially costly. And of course, with the powers of independence, we could act on energy pricing for the benefit of the people in Scotland. Yes, I'll take the intervention.
Duncan Massey.
Just on your claim there that renewables are an extremely cheap form of energy, perhaps you could explain why the current CFD costs for offshore wind are currently sitting at £95 per megawatt hour, which is significantly higher than the market price of gas.
Heather Anderson.
My statistics are taken from reports from the industry which explained those costs. I'm not working in the industry, so I can't answer your question directly, but I'm relying on reliable resources who gave me those prices from the industry. As I said before, with the powers of independence, we could act on energy pricing for the benefit of people in Scotland. And right now, what the sector needs is leadership and the political stability to ensure it will continue to attract long-term investment. The SNP has provided and will continue to provide that stability and leadership. But, Presiding Officer, the success of our energy sector must be determined not just by how many turbines we install. It must be evidenced in the skilled workforce and industry the industry nurtures and the number of households living in warmer homes and paying lower bills. In Dundee, a company called Whole Life Consultants Limited have used some really smart modelling to work out that it would take 15,990 person-years to deliver all the interventions Dundee needs. They've worked out just how many tilers, brickies, carpenters, joiners, scaffolders, plasterers, roofers, painters, surveyors, electricians, glaziers, architects, staff, managers and professional staff you need to get the job done. And that job in Dundee is installing the insulation, replacing the windows and boilers, fitting the solar and PV panels, installing the smart decarbonised energy systems we need. It will transform people's quality of life, and if we're able to take advantage of this opportunity, it's real work for about 1,600 people a year going forward, and that's jobs that Dundee could do with. To give you a sense of that scale, if we had to do it, it would take all of the MSPs in this chamber 120 years, or probably much longer, because we don't have any of the necessary skill set. But thankfully, our job is to set the direction of travel and let other organisations address the skills shortage. And here in Dundee, I think I'm in Dundee all the time, Dundee and Angus College is one of those key institutions. They're doing the real job of ensuring that the future workforce is ready. They enrol around 800 students a year in construction, engineering and building services. They've worked out that the skills you need to be a mechanical engineer are equally applicable to maintaining wind turbines. Working closely with industry partners like Vestas, the college is now ensuring that their students' skills are fully compatible with and transferable to offshore wind technology. And they have diversified their courses to ensure their students are achieving the mandatory qualifications they need to work offshore. This is real work in the real world. Presiding Officer, if Scotland is to remain a global leader in renewable energy, we must continue to support institutions like Dundee and Angus College, who are quietly doing the hard work of turning ambition into reality, developing the technicians, engineers and skilled professionals who will power our future economy. I fully support the motion and all the SNP government is doing to continue to grow Scotland's economy.
We now move to the closing speeches. I call Willie Rennie. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I welcome Stephen Flynn to his new position. If the Chamber is good enough to elect me as convener of the Transport Committee, I look forward to him coming before that very committee. The transport will be a key part of growing the economy, so I look forward to that partnership approach, which I'm sure we will be able to endeavour towards. One of the things that frustrates me about debates on the economy is when everybody trades their own statistics. And I think what we should agree is, of course, we can pick stats that favour our argument over the other. We can show that the UK is better than Scotland, or Scotland's better than the UK, or the best in the world, or best on the universe. I'm not sure which way it is or how it benefits us at all, because I think what's most important is we recognise we need to do better. Because Karen Adam was right. It's how people feel that what really matters, and the people of Buckie want to feel better. The fact that only half of the electorate turned out to vote in this election was a clear indication they didn't think this place was working for them. So we need to do better, no matter what the stats say, because the stats only really try to prove that we are right politically. It doesn't benefit anybody's life. So let's focus on actually trying to make an improvement. Change approach is what is going to be required. And I think the first one is around about that detail matters. And I am increasingly convinced the glitzier the offer, the less convincing that it will be and the less meaningful it will be in delivering actual change. And I think the Minister was right when he highlighted about predictability and certainty, and it was something that I think Daniel Johnson alighted on as well. Businesses want to know what's expected of them. They don't have time to look through every single press release that government issues to find out whether this is real change or just a repeat of a previous statement or a spin on a previous announcement that actually doesn't mean anything different from what has been agreed before. So let's have a bit of boring predictability. so that businesses know what's expected of them and they can get on with what they do best, which is run their businesses rather than try to second-guess what the government's doing. The second one, is which Daniel Johnson was absolutely right about, which is around about profit. And we should not be squeamish about profit. Profit's a good thing, because profit, like when my dad was in business, profit was invested right back into the business to grow it and provide a better service for the community in which those businesses were serving. So let's not be squeamish about this. Let's recognise we can't achieve any of this by ourselves. Government is not all-powerful. The private sector is playing an important role in delivering economic growth, so let's work together in partnership. Let's have a strategy that works together. The next change of approach that we require is to accept, and sometimes this chamber hasn't accepted it, that work is good. Work is a good thing. People should be striving towards working. There's no shame in the fact that you can't work, but if you can work, you should work. And you should pay taxes because that's good for society. You should participate in society. And then the next one, and this, again, this Parliament's had some blind spots on it, is certain sectors, again, they feel a bit squeamish about. Now, I went down to see Babcock at Rosyth just recently. 3,000 workers there now. The place is absolutely buzzing, really buzzing. Now, when I was the MP for West Fife, at the height of the construction of the aircraft carriers, they had 1,500 workers. It's double that now. We should celebrate that. Good young apprentices getting good jobs to defend this country. And I think that's an important factor. We need defence in this country, and therefore we should celebrate the fact that Scotland has got many great defence businesses that we should be supporting, and we should say it loudly and clearly that we are with them. And then energy. Energy, we have flip-flopped all over the place depending on what the international challenge is, whether it's on price or security or whether we're on the climate. Let's have consistency. So again, businesses know what is expected of them rather than constantly changing depending on what the political winds are. So we need to have pragmatism and we need to have an approach that works. Now, I think there's various levers this government has got that it can use and use effectively, and I thought Lloyd Melville, in an excellent contribution, highlighted exactly the power of procurement. Now, that covers housing, it covers all the areas round about the education, universities. All of that are great political levers. So let's use all of them to grow the economy of this country, because then together, by hunting for agreement, we can get economic growth to help those very people in Buckie that Karen Adam talks about.
Thank you. Can I call Craig Hoy? 4 minutes, please, Mr. Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I yet again welcome Stephen Flynn to the Chamber and to thank him for his maiden speech. When he posed the rhetorical question as to why he'd come here, I think some people did think that he came here because he wanted to be a very large fish in a very small pond after his period in Westminster, the SNP's very own Andy Burnham. And I think he got off to a good start here, perhaps not the great white shark that he hoped to be in these waters, not a sprat, not a minnow, but I think there is still some work to do, because what he could and should have done during that speech was to apologise for some of the issues that arose in this Parliament in the last Parliament that seriously impeded Scotland's ability to compete globally and to grow our own economy. Principally to apologise for the ongoing presumption against oil and gas, which is resulting in thousands of jobs, month after month, being lost in this sector. Now, when he said, obviously, that, and other SNP MSPs repeat this, that we introduced the Energy Profits Levy, yes, we did during a period of excess profits. But let's bear in mind the SNP wanted us to go further and faster, and Labour, when they came into office, sought to extend it when we were ready to wind it down. So there is only one party in this chamber that is committed to growing our economy through growing our oil and gas sector, and that is the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. Mr Flynn could and should have apologised for the damage done to the hospitality sector during the last Parliament, when in budget after budget the SNP took funds from Westminster to provide rates relief to the struggling hospitality sector and instead diverted that into other areas. Mr Flynn could have and should have apologised to our island communities because of a corruption of the procurement process meant that many of our communities still are deprived of those lifeline ferries and the economic damage that this will do as we go into high season again. He could and should have apologised to the Scottish licensing and the brewing sector for the damage that was done through, for example, the botched deposit return scheme and the ongoing problems that we're seeing because of the seeds of doubt that the SNP are sowing within that sector. And as the Minister sits down with businesses across Scotland, what he now could and should do, if he wants to restore their trust in Scotland as a place where they will invest, is to listen seriously to their concerns, because I think their concerns are very, very clear. When it comes to recruiting the best staff from the United Kingdom and around the world, that damaging tax differential between Scotland and the rest of the UK is a fundamental issue. When it comes to the skills mismatch in our economy, which year after year the SNP has ducked, he could sit down with business and horizon scan to see really what should Scotland's colleges be producing. When he talks about deregulation and the planning system, rather than giving us simply an open and honest answer to say, let's talk about it, the SNP, after 19 and 20 years in government, should have some big and bold ideas. And when it comes to removing red tape, the SNP could and should do what it has said in the past, which is to reduce the size of the state. And we will watch closely to see if Ivan McKee can do that. Now, we heard some other interesting contributions today. Lloyd Melville, I think, who's not in his place, Lloyd Melville quite rightly identified the huge pool of capital that we potentially could have within Scottish public sector pension funds. And I would encourage the Minister to look to Quebec and Ottawa to see how global investment is coming to Scotland through, for example, those Canadian state and teachers' pension funds. But ultimately, none of this is rocket science. And as my colleague Rachel Hamilton said, a low-tax, deregulated economy where we take government off businesses' back and start to deliver true economic growth is within our reach. But it requires a realisation that economic growth is good in and of itself, Mr Harvey, and that's something that we should continue to bang the drum for. So ultimately, if we want Scotland to prosper now and into the future, we have to tackle the burden of taxation, we have to tackle the burden of red tape, we have to ensure that the government is off businesses' back, and ultimately we should support our homegrown businesses like our hospitality sector and Scotland's oil and gas sector.
Thank you. Just to inform the Chamber, we have received apologies from Lloyd Melville, so he has permission to leave the Chamber. Could I please call Christopher Lees up to 6 minutes, please?
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I begin by declaring an interest as a member of Orkney Islands Council and welcoming the Cabinet Secretary to post. As has been covered by my colleague Patrick Harvey, all too often when we talk about growth in the economy, we're not precise enough. Not all economic growth is equal, and not all investment delivers positive outcomes. Too often, economic success is simply seen as a volume of investment, or, as Willie Rennie said, our obsession with statistics. Important questions need to be asked about our economy. Who owns it, who benefits from it, and who controls where those profits are going? And I thought Karen Adam reflected very aptly on this in terms of inclusive growth in the right places and for the right reason. That's what's essential to building a fairer and more prosperous country that takes communities along with us. Strong track records of enterprise and innovation in communities across Scotland already exist, and this is not the same as unchecked foreign direct investment or multinational ownership of our economy and our assets. Does our future lie in an economy of extraction, or is it one built on community wealth creation and resilience building? Community organisations across the country already own businesses, land, energy production, housing, harbours, the list goes on. Community groups are already creating jobs, providing services, enhancing resilience and stimulating economic activity, often where it is hardest for government to do so. They do so more efficiently, with greater local benefit and at remarkable value to the public purse. They achieve this despite barriers to financing, ownership and decision-making power. The challenge is not a lack of economic opportunity or potential, and I agree with the Cabinet Secretary on that. However, one big challenge we do face is too much leakage out with our economy. The Centre for Local Economies Scotland report Blown Away, following the money in Scotland's onshore wind sector, shows the extent of this situation. It shows the extent of profit generation in our rural and island communities versus how much they are benefiting, and that inequity is not sustainable. And all the while, it shows that hundreds of millions of pounds are flowing into offshore tax havens. When it comes to profit being generated already, which by the government's own best practice communities are entitled to a share of, the figures are also stark. Government guidance suggests community benefit payments should be around £5,000 per installed megawatt index linked. Yet across 261 operational wind farms, the report found that actual payments averaged just £3,167 per megawatt. By contrast, community-owned wind farms delivered the equivalent of over £260,000 per megawatt. That's nearly 83 times more value flowing back into communities and local economies, back into projects by the community, for the community, be it housing, job creation, health and wellbeing initiatives, transport. All of these are saving the government money and delivering services on their behalf. And that's the difference that ownership of our economy makes. And I agree there's a balance to be struck, and we have to be pragmatic about what we're able to deliver and work in partnership. But we are nowhere near that balancing point yet, and government must recognise that in laying out its vision for our economy. We have an excellent opportunity to find that balance and work in partnership in the issue of repowering. Scotland's first-generation wind farms are approaching the end of their operational lives, yet less than 1% of Scotland's existing onshore wind capacity is community-owned. We have an opportunity here not simply to replace ageing turbines, but to rethink ownership and create generational economic impact and structural change in our economy. We can ensure that the next generation of energy infrastructure delivers benefits for our local and national economies. The recent report by Equitable Energy showed in detail the scale of opportunity. The case for getting behind this as an economic opportunity is clear. These sites have roads, grid connections, planning histories and proven resource and capacity factors. And repowering and the economic gains that can be made from them can be made quicker and more efficiently. Likewise, the increase in generation possible to us with repowering exists with modern technology and turbine technology moving on. This year, we'll see the first opportunities to repower inclusively and strategically on Forestry Land Scotland sites. Government must get behind this and ensure that these first-generation sites are delivered effectively with longer-term mass repowering options available to us. Of course.
Liam MacArthur.
I'm very grateful to Christopher Leeskin and would echo, I think, all of the comments he's made today. Would he also accept that in terms of that repowering or in terms of genuine community benefit, this can only be derived where communities have the skills they need in order to drive forward those projects, and therefore the investment, particularly in colleges, is absolutely crucial.
Christopher Lees.
Yes, no, I quite agree, and I think the broader point that Liam MacArthur makes around community capacity and resourcing is really crucial. When communities are entering into these engagements with developers, they're facing often quite technical, legalistic financial discussions that many are understandably not prepared for. And what we've seen historically has been a postcode lottery of communities who have the existing capacities and volunteers, often those who are retired and have the time to take on the substantial roles. We've seen them excel and others get left behind. There's a piece of work that we must do to broaden out that, and I know that the government welcome that as well, I hope. There are significant barriers to repowering as we stand, however. MPF4 as it stands is inadequate. We need additional guidance that unlocks repowering and provides clarity and certainty to developers and community groups alike. Our strategic spatial energy plan needs to reflect our repowering potential and understand the opportunity ahead of us, and we must update our onshore wind policy statement with a strategic focus on repowering so we can deliver that potential. As we look ahead to the next 5 but also 25 years for our economy, let's make the right choices about growth and where our priorities lie. This Parliament has the chance to create generational change and transform the relationship between energy, our economy and our communities, and I'd urge the Cabinet Secretary to work with us and do so. Thank you.
Call Graham Simpson, up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's good to be making my first speech of this session. Members might be thinking, I wish he'd waited a little longer. Now, I've asked a few questions in the chamber and I've got used to being shouted at by the Cabinet Secretary, who I warmly welcome to his new role. I do hope that his somewhat robust approach to business in the Parliament doesn't translate into how he goes about what is a very serious and wide-ranging portfolio. And no, I spoke too soon there, Presiding Officer. He's at it already. But he should know that I'm not really interested in these antics. I would rather have, Mr Flynn, a constructive dialogue with you over the years. And if, like his predecessor in transport, he wants to listen to my ideas, then he might get some credit if he introduces some of them. That may help with any future ambitions that he may harbour. I don't know what they may be. Now, the Cabinet Secretary's motion, I have to say, it's surprisingly encouraging. It talks about growth and how that is key to delivering prosperity and improving public services. That's a good start. But unfortunately, there's no admission of the SNP's failures caused by its high tax, high regulation approach backed by their pals in the Scottish Greens. Mr Flynn will no doubt have had a flurry of meetings with people, perhaps trying to squeeze them in before he abandons ship and hence to America. And if he's met representatives of the tourism and hospitality sectors, he will have been left in no doubt that they want help. Parts of the sector so vital to the economy of this country is on its knees. Tourism levies won't help, and sky-high business rates are more likely to lead to businesses closing when we should be aiming for the opposite. The hospitality sector is crying out for business rates reform, and it needs to happen quickly. Action on business rates is also vital to rejuvenating our high streets. According to the Scottish Retail Consortium, shops occupying medium-sized and larger premises in Scotland are set to face £162 million more in business rates over the next 3 years than their equivalent size counterparts down south. Smaller stores liable for the basic and intermediate property rates will benefit from the Scottish Government's new retail, hospitality and leisure sectors rates relief, and that's welcome, but the poundage rates will still be above those levied in England, while the amount that can be claimed will be capped, unlike in England. So it's a real issue. Presiding Officer, perhaps when Stephen Flynn is on his jolly stateside, he might check out the transport system there, because in many parts of the world, in fact, in many parts of Britain, transport systems are light years ahead of where we are in Scotland. Our transport system is not digitally connected. We need to have multimodal smart ticketing. The technology exists, and it's being used elsewhere on these aisles. I'd be happy to talk to Mr Flynn about that, and I recommend that he gets out and about over the summer, and when he returns, he meets with the government's Smart Ticketing Advisory Board and asks them what the hold-up is. I would go a bit further than that, but politeness precludes me, Presiding Officer, from saying what I really think about that. Now, digital connectivity is an ask of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, as is a call for a Scottish tourism and hospitality growth plan. We need to have one, and it needs to lead to action. The Scottish Tourism Alliance set the government a number of challenges in its first 100 days, its first year, and over this parliamentary term. We have their first ask for the first 100 days, a dedicated named Cabinet Secretary, and let's hope Mr Flynn can deliver. I've already mentioned their second ask, accelerating business rates reform, but thirdly, they want to see the government commit to no new regulatory and tax burdens on businesses or any policies that negatively impact on Scotland's competitiveness. And instead, they ask the Scottish Government and MSPs to proactively partner with the sector to identify, shape and deliver a new set of ambitious policies to support the industry to grow in a sustainable and responsible way. Now, all this may go against the grain for the SNP, but maybe Mr Flynn can surprise us. In the first year, they want to see that growth plan that I mentioned. They also want to see the Scottish Government identify a multi-year funding package for Visit Scotland, Event Scotland and destination management organisations. They're being realistic in wanting better transport over the course of this Parliament. I would act quicker, but Transport Scotland does not work at pace, as most of us know, so perhaps we'll have to wait. Presiding Officer, Duncan Massey's amendment retains much of the Cabinet Secretary's motion, but adds the rather obvious line that lower taxes lead to growth. Lower taxes lead to more revenue, and that's something that a previous Finance Secretary failed to grasp, and all others since, and it's holding Scotland back. Now, I've listened with interest to the contributions of other members, and including Mr Flynn, of course, who did mention independence, but he also mentioned having a quicker planning system without saying how we'd actually achieve that. Daniel Johnson mentioned the same. I would refer to Jenny Young, who has visited Forth Valley College this week, as have I, and she will have heard about the threat to our college sector from underfunding over a period of years by the SNP. This has to stop. Scotland's economy must grow in order to pay for the public services that we all need. We need a coherent, cross-sectoral plan to achieve this, one that doesn't hammer businesses and individuals with more regular and high tax. Scotland needs to become more competitive than England. In short, Scotland needs reform.
Thank you. I now call Paul Sweeney. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and it's a pleasure to close this debate on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party, and I welcome the Cabinet Secretary to his place and for making a fine maiden speech. I think we certainly are agreed on the ends, the objective for our country and the interests of its people. I think the question of this debate is turned on how best to achieve and effect those outcomes that we all want. Opportunity and potential were the words that were most frequently repeated in speeches this afternoon. And I think those are really significant concerns that face the people of this country, certainly reflected in the recent election, as members have mentioned. A deep sense of alienation in the country today, a deep sense of injustice in the country today. And I think to the words of Donald Dewar, the late great Donald Dewar, when he opened the Parliament in his first speech here, that he looked forward to the days ahead when this chamber will sound with debate, argument and passion, when men and women from all over Scotland will meet to work together for a future built from the first principles of social justice. And I think social justice is at the heart of what we're talking about today when we consider economic growth and how best that serves the interests of the people we represent. GDP, gross domestic product, is a simple enough equation. Consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus exports minus imports. But behind that is a question of who benefits from that equation and who owns the proceeds of the growth and the activity. The main factor in that equation that the government deals with is, of course, government expenditure. And I thought there were a number of thoughtful speeches, notably from the member for Angus South, who noted that government expenditure, government procurement could do a lot more. It could work a lot harder for the people of Scotland, and I think that's something that we would certainly want to encourage. In the last statistics that I've seen, £8.9 billion of public expenditure in 22-23, but only around half of that spent in Scotland itself, generating the multiplier effect that could benefit Scotland's people. If I can translate that into a practical example from the industry that I worked in shipbuilding, and I know the member for Inverclyde has a strong interest in that and reflected in his speech too. Whilst we have a shipbuilding industry we are proud of in this country, we could achieve a lot more with the purchasing power of the Scottish Government. So significant amounts of shipbuilding contracts going overseas to Turkey, to China and to Poland. And one of the main reasons why that's happening is because the Government hasn't put in place the financial mechanisms for Scottish shipyards to front finance shipbuilding contracts. Therefore, they're not able to compete to win that business. That's something that could be easily fixed with a joined-up approach, and I hope it's something the Government will look at, and it's certainly something I appealed to the Cabinet Secretary's predecessor, Kate Forbes, to look at when she was in government. I hope we can make progress in this session. And it turns back to a point that was raised in a number of speeches as well, the thwarted potential of our people. The 500,000 people who are locked out of work in Scotland, a great unused capital of human potential. I remember thinking to another great shipbuilder in Scotland, Jimmy Reid, at his funeral. There was a fantastic speech that Billy Connolly made in a eulogy when he was with Jimmy Reid. He was talking about how they passed a high-rise block of flats in Glasgow, and he was saying that behind every one of those windows was a Nobel Prize-winning chemist or an Olympic athlete that was going to win the gold medal, but they never got the chance because from birth they were denied the opportunities. And I think that comes back to the point we made in a number of speeches about colleges, the 20% cut to colleges and the inability to connect up educational opportunities for people. And I see that certainly in the industry I worked in shipbuilding, where we're seeing lots of contractors coming in from all around the world to work in Scotland shipyards because we simply can't get the labour the skilled labour into the yards to do the jobs needed. And it's tragic because we're seeing lots of lost potential, lots of lost jobs elsewhere in the Scottish economy. So getting that joined up and that connected in an efficient and effective way is really important. And I think that's a good target for the government in the coming years. Let's make that government expenditure work harder to unlock investment and grow the economic base, the tax base, improve consumption and even promote exports around the world, which will all contribute to positive economic growth. But I think it's also important to reflect the speeches that were made elsewhere in the Chamber about the nature of foreign ownership in Scotland. So around 6% of Scotland's wealth is actually taken out of the country in extractive investments which are rent-seeking, take wealth out of Scotland. I think it's important to recognise that greater ownership of our economy is important. It's simply saying foreign direct investment is up in Scotland isn't always a good thing. And if I can point to an example in the Cabinet Secretary's own constituency, the Wood Group takeover recently by Dubai-based Sidara is a great shame for Scotland, because Wood Group was one of the great legacies of the North Sea for this country, one of the great industrial champions that we built in Scotland, and to see it lost to foreign ownership in the way it was avoidable and really disappointing. And I did bring suggestions to the government last session about how that could have been solved with the government taking a transitional stake in the business, but that wasn't really listened to. So I think we need to be more interventionist and more active and more agile in protecting Scottish ownership.
Can you wind up, please?
It's a great shame to see the loss of Scottish-owned businesses and industry and potential. So to join some of those themes up, I think that's how the government could work much harder for the interests of the Scottish people. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Stephen Flynn to wind up the debate. 9 minutes, please, Mr Flynn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There's a fair few members who have entered the Chamber, so they haven't had the opportunity to perhaps enjoy the lively and spirited debate that we had here this afternoon. And I was particularly struck by the consensus that we managed to achieve, Presiding Officer. I managed to get both Daniel Johnson and Duncan Massey to agree that what we are now proposing was hopeful for the future. I think I even got Patrick Harvie and Duncan Massey to agree on the purpose of taking back control, if I was listening absolutely correctly. Mr Harvie's correcting me in that regard, but of course that might be where the consensus may or may not have ended. And I have to say to Mr Harvie that I know he's desperate to disagree with me, but if he listened to my opening remarks, there was actually a lot upon which we agreed, because I was quite clear in setting out my view that we need an economy that works for absolutely everyone. Indeed, I said that means good jobs and good wages. It means stronger businesses with the opportunity to grow. It means ensuring that the generations that follow our own enjoy better living standards than we do ourselves. And I'm sure he'd agree on that point, as I'm expecting him to do now.
Patrick Harvie.
I'm grateful for that comment, and I hope, if he's right, that we will hear more about the concept of the well-being economy, which we didn't hear much about today. But one thing he was unclear about in his remarks was when he talked about Rosebank, and he blamed environmental assessments, Tory environmental assessments, for having blocked it. Can he confirm, does he in fact still support what I took to be the Scottish Government's position, that they support environmental assessments and that these projects must pass a climate compatibility test, whatever on earth that actually means? If they're not compatible with climate action, they shouldn't go ahead.
Cabinet Secretary.
So Mr Harvie may have misheard me when I was correcting, I believe it was Mr Hoy earlier on in the debate, because the point I was making to him, because he was complaining about the fact that these projects hadn't gone forward, was simply to highlight the fact that it was his government who'd been in charge in Westminster when they'd been dragged through the courts. And of course we had the Finch ruling in respect of Scope 3 emissions. It was purely a point of clarity for Mr Hoy's benefit. And safe to say he was needing a fair bit of help in respect of clarity earlier on. Indeed. Now, we've listened in great detail this afternoon about various aspects of what people would like to happen to Scotland's economy. One of the themes which has cut through that, Presiding Officer, has been in relation to tax, and the narrative coming from both Reform and the Conservative in relation to that very point. But what they don't recognise, and what they don't posit, and what they don't contribute to that debate is an acknowledgement of the importance of the state being able to contribute when it comes to skills, when it comes to infrastructure, and when it comes to health. That is absolutely fundamental to ensuring that we can secure an economy which is stable, where investors can have confidence, and where we can secure growth. And they would do well to reflect on that moving forward. Where we did get agreement was in relation to renewables. I think myself and Mr Johnson, and indeed many others behind me, were able to talk positively about renewables. And why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we talk positively about that when we recognise the fact that there is billions of pounds worth of investment flowing into Scotland, that there is in excess of 100,000 jobs in that sector alone? That is Scotland looking to the future and trying to capitalise upon the golden ticket that we've been offered a second time in relation to energy. Now, I can see Mr Massey squinting, and the reason he's squinting is because during the election campaign I had the joy of appearing in a hustings with him, where he argued that there was not one single job in Aberdeen related to the renewable sector. Not a single job related to the renewable sector. And I'm very surprised to see a Conservative member is about to try and defend Duncan Massey.
Finlay Carson.
I don't think that was the case. You've misjudged me. What I would like to ask is, what's your view on the thousands of rural constituents who see their rural landscapes being industrialised and being dumping grounds for some of these renewables? What do you say to those communities? Cabinet Secretary.
I completely reject the assertion from Finlay Carson in respect of a dumping ground. If he'd been in the chamber earlier, he would have heard me speak positively and hopefully about the benefit of farming and fishing and agriculture to Scotland's economy, both now and indeed in the future. Now, he might not want to embrace the fact that ultimately when you produce energy, as Scotland will do, you need to get it from A to B. You need to be able to deliver it to that market. But to use the terms that he's using, he does himself and indeed the renewable sector a complete disservice in that regard. Now, perhaps and I'm finding myself in agreement with Mr Rennie on far too many occasions since I came to this chamber. Perhaps not in regards to the glitz that I think he inferred that we perhaps bring to the debate. Oh, it's Nigel Farage's man. On you go. On you go.
Duncan Massey.
Thank you for again to the intervention. Will the Cabinet Secretary highlight that in AR7, the most recent funding round, the furthest north project was offshore Berwick, which obviously is not going to help the people of the north east of Scotland. And it was also set at a CFD price of £95 per megawatt hour, much higher than market prices, and set at a 20-year contract.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but I think Mr Massey misunderstands the concept of a strike price and a wholesale market price and how that operates in terms of the end user. But I'm very surprised that a member for the North East doesn't understand the fact that supply chains operate right across Scotland, across the energy sector, both within oil and gas and indeed within the renewables space. And I'm sure over the months and years to come he will learn that. But back to Mr Rennie, I think he made a couple of important points in respect of both profit and indeed in respect of work. I think it was a point also emphasised by Mr Johnson as well. None of us should be wary of talking about the benefit of profit for the very reasons that Mr Rennie outlined, because that's money that's hard-earned, and more often than not for a small and medium-sized enterprise, that's money that's reinvested back into their local communities. And in relation to work, it goes to the heart of the point I was trying to make earlier in my opening remarks with regards to productivity and making sure that we can skill up our workforce, our young people, our people who are out of work, our people who want to change jobs, so that they can contribute in a fashion that delivers for all of us collectively. And I look forward to working with him in that regard. And that boosting productivity is going to be so crucial to what we seek to do in order to grow Scotland's economy. So too will be unlocking investment. So too will be making sure that we champion the industries of the future, whether that's AI, whether that's quantum, or indeed others. It's about making sure that we expand Scotland's global reach, and we will build upon the work that we have done in that regard up till now. And it is, Presiding Officer, about being brave in respect of reforming the system. whether that's the planning system, whether that's a regulatory framework that sits behind it. I like to think we can get common cause and common consensus in that regard, because we have to be, we must be the Parliament that delivers economic growth for Scotland, because far too many of our people don't know what that feels like. They don't know what that lived experience means to them, their families and their communities. Mr Hoy is tempting me here to allow him in, Presiding Officer, and with your good grace I'd be more than happy to do so.
Craig Hoy.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, but before he closes, could he respond to Sir Tom Hunter, who said this: "The current state of our nation does not reflect our potential. I have never heard so much disquiet amongst business leaders, paying yet more and more tax with poorer and poorer outcomes." Is that the kind of Scotland he wants to build upon?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, fortunately for Mr Hoy, I was in the company of Tom Hunter recently, and what I heard from Tom Hunter was him state that the meeting that he'd had with Scotland's First Minister, I think it was the First Minister's first meeting upon returning to office, was incredibly productive. And we're going to build upon that, and we're going to make sure that individuals like Sir Tom and others within our business community, the innovators, the investors, the entrepreneurs, know that they have a government that's on their side, that's working with them to make sure there's economic growth for Scotland, in Scotland. And, Presiding Officer, I move the motion in my name.
Thank you, Cabinet. Of order.
The officer, earlier on, earlier on, Presiding Officer, I failed to register my interests.
Right.
As a shareholder in a hospitality business, and I draw my members to my register of interest. Although, Presiding Officer, I'm not clear whether the registers of interest have been published, but I'm doing it just in case. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. The deadline is Saturday. Sorry, that concludes the debate on growing Scotland's economy. There are 6 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is Amendment 290.3 in the name of Daniel Johnson, which seeks to amend Motion 290 in the name of Stephen Flynn. Be agreed? Are we all agreed? No. We are not agreed. Therefore, we move to a vote. There will be a short suspension to allow members to use the digital voting system.